Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, as we're now going to be diving into the situation in New England regarding their young quarterback, Drake Maye. We just talked about all of the rookie quarterbacks and young quarterbacks that played this past weekend, and specifically, I think that the Jaden Daniels performance on Monday night is something that a lot of people within the Patriots circle, at least in the media, probably not quite as much in the locker room, but definitely people surrounding the Patriots talking about, well, these are the benefits to having your young quarterback out there playing football, is you can continue to learn and get better on a week-to-week basis, which is definitely true. And Washington deserves a lot of credit for the way. And Cliff Kingsbury, who, again, myself and a lot of people haven't been extremely high on throughout the course of his coaching career in the NFL, that he has done a good job of sort of bringing Daniels along through these first 3 weeks. But what I would say, the counter argument to that is the reality of the situation for New England, which is that overall, they are a pretty untalented roster. You look at specifically on that offensive side of the ball, their offensive line is a total mess. They have right tackles, a rookie right tackle playing left tackle for them. You have a bunch of injuries on that front line. Michael Onwenu, one of the two maybe positive offensive linemen for them, he's getting, pushed back and forth from should he play guard or tackle. That, you've seen his Pro Football Focus grades take a dip, and there's just no consistency within that offense whatsoever. You look at the receiving core as well. They've been largely uninvolved outside of maybe a little bit of rookie Jalen Polk, but with Kendrick Bourne currently on the injured reserve list, there's really not all that much talent there. And this is a situation where, at least for Daniels in Washington, he has a good enough offensive line. They at least spent money on Nick Allegretti and Tyler Biotish, two of the top offensive linemen. Might be a little bit of a weaker class this past season in free agency, but they still went and they spent on the offensive line. And they also have a receiver in Terry McLaurin, which is a legitimate number one option, which is something that the Patriots currently do not have. So, all of that being said, there is increased pressure now on the Patriots moving forward here, especially after what was a very underwhelming performance from Jacoby Brissett on primetime football last Thursday. And it feels like the pressure is ramping up a little bit on the organization to make a move. This afternoon, head coach Drake Maye said in a press conference that Maye has looked comfortable enough in practice to the point where they would have no problem throwing him in the game if necessary. And it sounded like, again, hypothetically here, not that anybody is, wishing or trying to speak injuries into existence, that if Jacoby Brissett were to go down with an injury, that Drake Maye, they would be confident in just being able to ride the season out with him as opposed to going out and getting a veteran quarterback. And this is a situation where Mayo has repeatedly said since August that when Drake Maye is ready, he is going to play. Now, truthfully, I think that is probably a little bit of a fib there. I don't think it's all in Drake Maye's control, because what we saw in the preseason, at least, and we only got to see so much in terms of the actual preseason games versus what was going on behind the scenes. But it sounds like, generally speaking, even with the reporters close to the situation there in New England, that Drake Maye was playing better than Jacoby Brissett throughout the final weeks of training camp, and that they decided to stick with Jacoby Brissett, which, for the record, I think is the right decision for all of the reasons that I just outlined, in that the Patriots offense really isn't capable of nurturing a young quarterback and bringing him into the NFL. Now, nurturing is a word that we talk about, a mother and their child. Ultimately, this is the NFL. Drake Maye is making, millions of dollars at this point, albeit still on his rookie contract, that it's not like everything needs to be perfect for him from the moment that he steps into the league, but you do have to have a situation that's at least competent enough that Drake Maye isn't getting knocked down every 2 seconds, which is, I mean, you look at, he made his debut last week against the Jets on that final drive. At that point, the Jets are playing their backup quarterbacks, and even still, Drake Maye sacked 2 times. One of them, I did think he was holding onto the ball maybe a little bit too long, but all things considered, when Jacoby Brissett also goes down an additional 5 times, it's clearly not just on the quarterback that this is a situation that the line really is just that bad. And, all of that being said, I do think that we are getting to a point where the Jets just provided a little bit of a blueprint on Thursday Night Football last year that if you just make a statement that you are not going to the Patriots, we're not going to allow you to run on us, what are you going to do from there? And unfortunately, Jacoby Brissett is just pretty limited from a downfield threat perspective. And I think that ultimately here, Drake Maye is somebody who, yes, is far from a fully ready NFL quarterback. He should be able to provide more of a downfield threat. And that's why I think that the Patriots now are going to Cincinnati this upcoming weekend for their Week 4 matchup. I feel like there is a very strong chance that could be Jacoby Brissett's last start with the Patriots, because when you look moving forward here with the Patriots schedule, which is one of the more difficult ones in the NFL, it's not like you're exactly going to get a ton of opportunities to, start him and have some sort of cupcake waiting for you on the other side. That it feels like Week 5 against the Dolphins at home may just be the perfect time for him to be able to make his debut. Because if you look at the schedule, again, in San Francisco this upcoming week, they're very clearly sticking with Brissett for this game. We would have heard otherwise by now if anything different were to be the case. Brissett will probably have a chance to, if he plays well in that game, I have a hard time imagining that they're just going to bench him outright. But then from there, Week 5, Miami is at home. Miami's a banged up team. You probably don't need to, because of the fact that I can't imagine Tua's going to be playing football by then. Still a talented offense, but we saw what just happened against Seattle the other weekend, and I think that we are going to see the Patriots not have to put up 30 points in a race to keep up with the Dolphins, that you get that game at home. You're at home again against the Texans, which is a tough matchup, but again, you're not going to have the perfect cupcake landing spot. Then you are on the road in London, in Jacksonville, where that's a weird one, but at least you have a couple games experience under your belt by that point. And then you come back home and you are home again against the Jets, which is a tough defense, absolutely. They just showed that against the Patriots last weekend. But you're talking about 3 home games, and a weird game in London, but at least it's a mutual field. The Patriots are actually, the Jaguars are the new London team based off of the fact that they get sent there every year. They're actually playing 2 games in London this year. But if I'm not mistaken, and if we have any, fans from London in the comment section, feel free to correct me. But I feel like the idea, the reputation, at least I've seen one Patriots game in London where the Pats are actually one of the more popular teams overseas, considering the fact that during the Tom Brady years, they were good enough to the point where, they were one of the only teams that were available to international countries from a viewing perspective, that they were playing in the playoff games and the Super Bowls, and that, it's not like it's going to be this situation where Drake Maye is going to be against a hostile crowd. He can play his first 4 games avoiding being in that hostile situation as he works himself in. And then you have additionally the Titans on the road after that as well, which I don't think is an overly difficult schedule either. So that feels like a pretty good ramping up point to me. I mentioned that Kendrick Bourne is on the injured reserve list. There's probably a good amount of NFL fans who aren't even really familiar with who Kendrick Bourne is. But the reality of the situation is, and it's maybe a little bit more of a statement on the Patriots than anything else, but Kendrick Bourne's been their best receiver these past few seasons, and I think that he's been legitimately a positive asset for them. Now, he spent a whole year basically in the doghouse of Matt Patricia and Bill Belichick at one point. Then last year, he's having a very impressive first half of the season before tearing his ACL. So there's still a lot of unknown there as to whether or not he can be a difference maker. But this is a receiving core that is so bare bones right now that once Bourne comes back, I think that, getting a home game against the Dolphins, that might be the point where we see Drake Maye start his first football game. Now, this is a lot of speculation here. It does sound like behind the scenes there is a lot of buzz that Drake Maye could be starting sooner rather than later. And as much as I do feel like the Patriots should try to protect Drake Maye from themselves, I also feel like at a certain point, you can only last so long in an NFL season throwing for 100 yards a game, which is basically what the case has been for the Patriots, where you go game by game for them. Their total yards as a whole against the Jets this past weekend was 139. Only 61 passing yards total when you add sacks onto that. Then you go against Seattle, where you actually get a good first half from Jacoby Brissett, but you finish with 125 passing yards in that game. And then against the Bengals, now that was more so about them just trying to control the clock and not let Joe Burrow touch the ball, but it's 120 passing yards in that game. So they can only, play this limited style of offense for so long. I think that it might be time for the Patriots to start looking into starting Drake Maye. But again, I would not be in any hurry to rush him. If Jacoby Brissett can provide, can show that he is enough to hold down the offense, I would lean in his direction. But that being said, the pressure is sort of mounting a little bit for the Patriots, but let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section as we are going to move on to our final segment of the day. Sticking in New England, the reigning NBA champion Boston Celtics just had their media day yesterday afternoon, so I want to dive into some of the biggest news in regards to specifically the injury situation with Kristaps Porzingis and how that will affect their actual on-the-court play. Maybe touch a little bit on the selling of the ownership situation and just talking about where this team appears to be at from a mental perspective heading into their title defense. So we are going to be diving into all of that, but before we do so, we're going to take our final break of the show. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.